reload. How about now? Can everybody see me? Let's see here. Can you guys see me? There was an error on the Hangouts. Somebody put 1 in the chat if you can hear and see me. Okay, good. We're going to be joined a little later by Arjun. I think a few of you have probably seen him already. Arjun from Calcutta. You know, he's a really chatty Cathy. A chatty Cathy. Sorry, Arjun, I had to do that. Since Hank Azaria is not going to do insensitive Apu impressions, I guess I have to do the insensitive stuff now since nobody else wants to do it. And you know, it might as well be me. So while we're, you know, I see there are a few people here. I was expecting people to tune in a little, you know, a few minutes later, but 2 topics. First of all, there is a straw poll in the description. Please take note. It is the first link in the description. I will put that link also in the chat. And basically, what the fuck? Hold on. I don't know what the hell happened there. Let me just click on it. So, okay. So if you take this, what the fuck? Can't do anything right, can I? I'm just a hot mess. So this straw poll is basically helping me help you, help me bring you more shit talking and you know, annoying rants. So it says, and you can tune in. Oh, I did have it open already. Whatever. So you go to this, and basically it's a really simple question. What's the best time for you to tune into the live stream for Bold Like a Leopard? You know, you can pick. I gave 5 options, and if you have a different option, I didn't see where you pick on this straw poll app. You know, another, you know, please put your own answer, whatever the hell you do on some of these other polls. So if you have a different answer, I'm sorry, but either you're going to have to put it in the discussion or just accept the fact that somebody else is going to outvote you. But the idea here is that there will be a few more regular broadcasts once, you know, throughout the week. I don't know if it will be every day. I realized when I produced the poll, and you can't go back and redo it. So I realized I could have just made another poll, but I didn't even mention days. So, and then I said, well, who cares? Because everybody's schedule is already different according to ours. So if you want to do it, take a quick moment to select one or two. I'd request 1 or 2 different answers. If you click on all of them, then it's obviously not going to happen. You'll probably even get less live streams. So those of you that they're thinking, oh, I'm gonna troll Ramon, I'm gonna select all of them. No, that doesn't really that's not gonna happen. I'm not gonna stream 5 times a day for an hour. What am I, you know, Anderson Cooper or something? Like a CIA android? It's not gonna happen, guys. So yeah, go on this poll. Let me see if any of you have voted already. And let me see here. Results. Oh, holy cow. 4 people decided 4 different things, or 1 person decided 4 different things. Thanks, assholes. Does the poll adjust for time zones? It says Eastern and Pacific. So those of you in the UK or whatever, just remember you're 5 hours ahead of Eastern. You'd be 8 hours ahead of Pacific. So just account for that. Those of you in India, I think it's either 11 or 12 hours. And Australia, you know, I can never remember when you guys are on. And it's kind of, it's like we're cursed from birth, all of us, that, you know, there's only a few people who watch this, but they happen to be in like 50 different time zones. So what are you going to do about that? I was going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys for, the time that it would take for people to come in. I see that there's plenty of people, and most of you are probably Cowboy haters. So, we'll probably leave that for a little later, just because, and some of you probably don't give a shit anyway. Jeffrey Allen Johnson, welcome. We have Lisa, Larry Pinochet, thank you. By the way, I tweeted or I gabbed you. Who else do we have? Did I forget somebody? J-Man, Truth Seeker. Thanks again for tuning in. Please share the stream anywhere that you think that there will be people who will be receptive. So today we are going to talk about a number of topics that have really, they've burst through the I guess the shield of media, and they can't even contain it. And no, it's not going to be the Kanye thing today. J-Man Truth Seeker, let's talk Cowboys. I need an update whenever you're ready. Well, I think it wouldn't be helpful right now. Raven Star Killer, welcome from Brazil. Bem-vindo, senor. I always butcher those Latin languages. It's a good thing I don't try to speak Italian on here. But what are the big burning questions today? Well, we are going to talk a little about Larry, I forgot to mention Cheryl. Print blanket. Very nice. So I'm gonna ignore the chat for a couple minutes just because it does distract me. So in the description, I always put a lot of the links for those of you that are new for the stories that I am gonna discuss. And I would say the one that I'd talk about first, which is technically the most important, is the one where the Washington Times is claiming that President Trump is going to pull the Federal Department of Education out of K-12 education. So basically, he signed an executive order, and I want to hear your opinions on this. Even if you're from Australia or Brazil or the UK, because I know that not every country believes in local control of education. So President Trump signed an executive order Wednesday to start pulling the federal government out of K-12 education, following through on a campaign promise to return school control to state and local officials. The order, dubbed the Education Federalism Executive Order, will launch a 300-day review of Obama-era regulations and guidance for school districts and directs Education Secretary Betsy DeVos to modify or repeal measures she deems an overreach by the federal government. For too long, the government has imposed its will on state and local governments. The result has been education that spends more and achieves far, far less. Far, far, far less. Sorry, Mr. Trump said. My administration has been working to reverse this federal power grab and give power back to families, cities, and states, give power back to localities. He said the previous administrations had increasingly forced schools to comply with whims and dictates from Washington, but his administration would break the trend. We know local communities know it best and do it best, said Mr. Trump, who was joined by several Republican governors for the signing. The time has come to empower teachers and parents to make the decisions that help their students achieve success. Ms. DeVos and Vice President Mike Pence were on hand for the ceremony, which was attended by 25 people, including lawyers, lawmakers, and governors. The executive order is not expected to have an immediate impact on school districts. Policy changes will follow a report on the findings of the review. The review will be headed by the Department of Education's Regulatory Review Task Force, according to the order. Ms. DeVos already has authority to modify or repeal regulations that are deemed a violation of federal law. The order, however, creates a review for identifying those areas and makes clear her mandate from the president to take action. Reducing the federal government's role in K-12 is part of Mr. Trump's reform agenda, which also includes the expansion of school choice programs. Among those at the signing ceremonies were Governors Kay Ivey of Alabama, Gary Herbert of Utah. That's a pretty nerdy name, Gary Herbert. Paul LePage of Maine, Brian Sandoval of Nevada, and Terry Branstad of Iowa, who also is Mr. Trump's nominee for ambassador to China. Also in attendance were Senator Lamar Alexander of Tennessee and Representative Virginia Foxx of North Carolina, the Republican chairs of the two chambers education committees. So that's the article. I'm going to take a quick glance. What's your opinion of that? Lisa PDX likes it. I just read it in your description, but did not hear news stories. But well, they're not going to report on it until they find a way. And I'll tell you the way they'll frame it in a second. And that's why I want to get out ahead of this story. I want you guys to give your opinion first. J-Man Truth Seeker appears to be in favor of it. Pinochet as well. Well, I mean, I think I kind of have an audience that agrees with me on this. So I did want to see if there was somebody, maybe Reverend Starkiller can tell me if it was Reverend Starkiller. Are you a woman or a man? Or in America, we also have the category, catfish here. So if you're one of those third genders, such as catfish or hemoglobin, just let me know. But Reverend Starkiller is from Brazil. I just don't know what gender you are, or if you have a gender. You could just put, vegetarian or something. But I want to hear what are the opinions of people from outside the U.S. or people that are not from this. LOL, I'm male. Okay, I mean, I was just putting it out there, man. I don't know if there's a law in Brazil where you're not allowed to ask somebody. Well, essentially, I would have probably gotten in trouble anyway. So, lots of third genders here, though. Well, in any case, this is my take on this story, and it's probably to be expected. Catherine said, Common Core is what happens when people who know nothing about human development design curricula. You can't force genius in trying to get results and frustrated students who drop out. Exactly. Catherine, welcome back, by the way. I haven't heard from you in a while. Look, in the United States, we do believe in more devolution of powers to local and state authorities on many issues. Sadly, for the past, I would say, almost 50 years, I think it was 1970, they created the Department of Education. They've been removing the prerogative for deciding educational standards from school districts and putting it at higher levels. The state government, the federal government. In some cases, that they even institute standards that are according to certain advocacy groups. So you kind of and in some cases the district complies with that, or the district wants that. You have some of these districts that are instituting, what I was just talking about, gender education and stuff, the whole transgender thing, which, in the good old days of a free country, we just called them transsexuals and nobody cared. I believe firmly that this is a great idea from the Trump administration, and it validates, and Arjun Sinha, who's going to join me later, is going to appreciate this metaphor. I'm going to use a Hindu metaphor, even though I don't believe in Hinduism. I want that to be very clear. But Betsy DeVos was put in the Department of Education as the role of Shiva the Destroyer. Shiva the Destroyer. Everybody who knows about Hinduism knows that there's different deities, and they all have different roles. But actually, I mean, in Judaism, we do believe that there's the role of God being, a valiant conqueror, somebody who destroys as well as creates. So it's actually beyond religion. Okay, she was put there as the role of somebody who comes in and destroys what's not needed. The Department of Education has been a failure for the past 5 decades. How many Arjun, I got your attention, didn't I, there? When you put somebody in there who's just firing people and slashing and burning and saying, oh, this standard sucks, fuck this. That is what Betsy DeVos was put in there to do. People don't understand that. They have, I think some people on the left know this, but they're not willing to acknowledge the real purpose behind it. Okay, so they go and say, well, you know, Betsy DeVos is an idiot. She doesn't know what she's doing. She could care less about real education. She has, I think she has like a bachelor's degree from some college, and well, I mean, we could just look. I think it is a good college, but it's just like a bachelor's degree in whatever. Calvin College in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So this is our education secretary, but they don't understand, or they don't want to understand, or they don't want to acknowledge that they understand what the real purpose is behind it. And those that do understand on the left are petrified about what she's doing, because they love having the Department of Education. People who are especially centrist liberals, but also going through the far left, you know, but centrist liberals especially love the Department of Education. They love the National Endowment of the Arts, which throws money at artists as if, you know, the government has a right to define who gets a little money for their artwork and who doesn't. They love those things because it essentially gives them the pretext to claim that the U.S. government is facilitating a greater society by basically bankrolling, you know, the future of our culture. And then the same thing in terms of the actual K-12 education, which is what we're talking about here. They want to believe that all of these reports and all of these studies and all of these, there was the race to the top initiative, which I'll show you in a second. Race to the top was it was a Obama administration admission or a program. It was a program that was an admitted failure. Sorry, I was pulling it up, so I kind of garbled that comment. But they basically said to school districts, improve your facilities and invest a ton of money into improving your facilities, and you'll be eligible for some of the $4 billion in funding of the Race to the Top reform. But here's from Politico. This is from 2013. It said, but 3 years in, Race to the Top hasn't spurred states to address what really is behind students' poor academic performance, poverty, and the associated lack of opportunities that accompany it, said Elaine Weiss, national coordinator of Broader Boulder Approach to Education. Her group advocates for a more targeted focus on poverty over the current slate of education reforms involving testing and accountability. So let me see where this analysis is from, though. So this was in 2013. Oh, I guess we can't find it. That's not very convenient. So this was rejected by the State Department, the Department of Education. They basically said, oh, we don't care about this. In its own progress reports, the Education Department has noted states struggles to deliver on all the promises made in exchange for Race to the Top money. It has flagged some winning states, including Georgia and Hawaii, for not delivering on what they promised. Another federal agency, the Institute of Education Sciences, won't complete its evaluation of Race to the Top for another 2 years. So let me explain why this. There's no doubt that this would have been a failure. What it essentially means is, if you're a school district, the federal government is telling you this, and here we go. This is from Alternet, which is a far left, like crazy left, or publication, which you know, they're pretty much of the opinion that the United States is basically Nazi Germany. But in any case, and this is from Diane Ravitch, who is a former official from the Clinton Department of Education. She wrote, sometimes events happen that seem to be disconnected, but after a few days or weeks, the pattern emerges. Consider this: on October 2nd, Secretary of Education Arne Duncan announced that he was resigning and planned to return to Chicago. Former New York Commissioner of Education John King, who is a clone of Duncan in terms of his belief in testing in charter schools, was designated to take Duncan's place. On October 23rd, the Obama administration held a surprise news conference to declare that testing was out of control and should be reduced to not more than 2% of classroom time. Actually, that wasn't a true reduction, because 2% translates into between 18 to 24 hours of testing, which is a staggering amount of annual testing for children in grades 3 to 8, and not different from the status quo in many states. So It says the National Association of Educational Progress showed no gains nationally in either grade in either subject. In mathematics, scores declined in both grades compared to 2013. So this is from 2013 to 2015 while the program was going on. It actually got worse. Usually the Secretary of Education presides at a press conference where he points with pride to increases in certain grades or in certain states. 2 years ago, Arne Duncan boasted about the gains made in Tennessee, which had won $500 million in Duncan's race to the top competition. This year, Duncan had nothing to boast about. So, you know, this was a program that was panned across the political spectrum as a failure, because it's basically it's the culmination of everything that's wrong with you know, the liberal federal government thinking, which is if you throw money at an issue, then somebody's going to solve it at the bottom. No, it doesn't work that way. And school districts, like I was starting to say earlier, what they were asked to do was to invest more money to bring their facilities up. So they already had to raise a lot of money through bonds and levies and whatever at the local level. Those of you that live in the U.S. know what I'm talking about. I'm not sure about the people overseas. I don't know how you guys raise money for education. So they would have to issue bonds or pass a school levy. By the way, hit the like button if you haven't already. And we'll just take a look at this straw poll. It looks like 9:30 p.m. is pulling ahead, as is 11:30 p.m. Although there's surprisingly a very small number of votes. So Arjun, I think we're going to have you on a little later than I thought. So everybody go vote in the straw poll. In any case, so you're telling a school district to raise more money, spend more money, you know, and get more liabilities, because when you build more buildings, then you need more people to take care of them, correct? You know, increasing facilities infrastructure means increasing cost of maintenance. So that was the whole logic behind it. And then we'll give you more money. But the new money is only temporary. So at its foundation, the whole project, the whole belief system behind Race to the Top, which was Obama's signature educational initiative, was bogus, because it believes that, oh, we're going to repay districts that have been raising a lot of money from their taxpayers by throwing more money at them. However, you know, what is the result is throwing more money is getting a bigger facility, is getting I mean, hypothetically, you could waste some of that money. I'm not sure, but you could waste some of that money on extracurricular stuff. I don't know if football fields are in play, but that has happened with certain districts around the country, that they raise a ton of money and build some bullshit football field. Slip of the tongue there. So yeah, I think it's a good thing. And by the way, fake Republicans for years have been saying, oh, we want to abolish the Department of Education, but they never did. President Bush had ample opportunity to do it. Didn't do it. Didn't even come close. In fact, he did the No Child Left Behind policy. So why is this going? And Catherine hit on it, I think, earlier. Why is this going to be demonized in the press? What they're going to say is, when you delegate the power back to local authorities, what you do, listen to this. This isn't me thinking. This is how they think. This is how the liberals and also the progressives think. Unfortunately, I have to throw both of them in the same bucket here. They will say, this will allow, hey, Lennon McCarthy, thanks for tuning in. This will tell them that they will start telling people, look, this will allow the Democrats, or sorry, the white districts. This will allow the white school districts to segregate again. It'll allow rich school districts to keep poor people out. It'll allow, you know, certain school districts to corporatize. That's what they will claim. They will claim that it's only the federal government that prevents school districts on the state and local level from discriminating against students. And unfortunately, what they fail to convey is how is it that the current status quo is helping students. Okay, I understand if there's a concern there, because we did have in the past in the United States, not going to deny it, we had a problem with racial discrimination against what they called it, African American students, against in some cases, I believe, against other races, including Hispanics. But sure, under federal mandates, including the Civil Rights Act, most of that has been devolved. It's been made illegal. So if you have an issue like that, my question is, why is it impossible for you to join a class action suit, and you would win it under the current laws, whether the laws are justified or not, the Civil Rights Act of 1965 or one of the other ones. I think there were 3 different Civil Rights Act of the 1960s, so I'm not sure which one dealt with segregation in schools. And of course, there's Brown versus Board of Education. But since then, people have been complaining, with the Department of Education existing in the United States. They've been complaining about de facto segregation. They've been complaining about, white parents moving out to the suburbs and taking their kids out of inner city school systems. Well, what do you want? They made the choice. They wanted to move to those school districts. I personally have gone to all different types of schools when I was a kid. So ones that had, large diversity of population, and ones that had almost no diversity of population. So for me, I see really the problem being, the government wants to choose which students go to which schools. That's what they used to do with forced busing back in the 1970s. For those of you that don't know, especially those of you overseas, if you lived in certain districts, especially in Boston, urban districts, Boston, here in Ohio, and Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Columbus. If you lived in Philadelphia, I believe, if you lived in a white neighborhood and you wanted your kid to go to a school that was close to you, around the block, and your neighborhood was like, let's say not just 95% white. It would be, of that 95%, it's like 98% Irish, or it would be 100% Polish and nothing else. And like in Michigan, they had school districts like that. What the government did, using a court order, was they forced your kid, in order to promote diversity, to get bused across town to the black high school, and then their kids would be bused into your high school. And everybody hated it. It was one of the most universally hated policies of the 1970s. And it was a complete failure. It devastated school districts. It hurts performance, because kids were often riding for an hour to school and an hour back. It was a disaster. It was a disaster, and that isn't necessarily on the federal Department of Education level. It wasn't enforced. It was enforced by district judges. So I'm sorry, but you have to, in order to help students that are from minority communities and poor communities, you can't force them to go to a school an hour away. Okay, that's not the answer. The answer is to deal with it on the local level, deal with it with local administrators, using the monies that they have in the best way possible, and letting the residents, letting the citizens decide which system is better, which curriculum is better. And if they fail that way, then they can fall on their own sword. But the federal government and the Department of Education, they've gotten away with 50 years of bullshit programs that haven't worked. There was No Child Left Behind under Bush. There was, and under Clinton, it wasn't much better. And President Reagan, he didn't have Congress to abolish the Department of Education. I think he had a Democratic Congress for most of his term in office. So I would say, yes, this is something I am 100% behind Donald Trump, behind Betsy DeVos. Let me see if Arjun is trying to join. I think I heard a chime. No, it was somebody else. Yeah, Arjun, you're going to have to join later. Sorry, we were talking about a half hour and then he would join, but I still haven't gotten past some of my other topics. But let me see. Some of these, you know what, Arjun? I don't know. I mean, if you read the comments, if you're in the chat, look at the stories below and tell me which one of these you want to talk about, because I'm not sure you'll want all of them. So let's get to the one that everybody's talking about, the one that's actually not that important, and that's this White House Correspondents' Dinner, which I'm sure a lot of people have already heard that there was a little flap about the comic who, if you can call her a comic, I've never personally heard of her, who attacked the White House press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and said that she lies and that she's fat and stuff like that. I'm seeing a surprising amount of pushback, not from conservatives, but from people in general. So this is from Politico, and I can't show the video here because you won't hear it. It's just it doesn't work on Hangouts. But it says comedian Michelle Wolf's biting routine at Saturday's 2018 White House Correspondents' Association dinner has triggered one of Washington's most recurring conversations. Is one night of pomp and politics worth the headaches that usually follow? Almost immediately after Wolf, best known as a correspondent on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, left the stage at the Washington Hilton, those who pack into the James S. Brady press briefing room on a daily basis began to distance themselves from her performance. A number of journalists deemed her act too caustic. The spirit of the event had always been jokes that singe but don't burn. Reporters who work with her daily appreciate that press secretary was there. So that the press secretary, this Twitter handle is Sarah Huckabee Sanders. So, and this was from NBC News White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell. At its core, the dinner is supposed to be a celebration of the First Amendment, an opportunity to laud the young journalists who have won the association's scholarships, and a place to applaud the current journalists whose work illuminates the public's understanding of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So here's somebody else. My goal in putting together last night's dinner was to unify the room and the country around journalism and the First Amendment, and I shared what I believed about those subjects in my own remarks, says Margaret Taylor, a Bloomberg correspondent, president of the White House Correspondents Association. The association, by tradition, does not preview or censor the entertainer's remarks. Some of them made me uncomfortable and did not embody the spirit of the night, and that is protected by the First Amendment. I appreciate Sarah Sanders for joining us at the head of the table and her great grace throughout the program. A persistent criticism of the glitzy dinner is that it fuels perceptions of excessive chumminess between the press and the government officials they're expected to hold accountable, a rationale that prompted the New York Times to back out more than a decade ago. But some journalists feared Saturday's dinner could lead to a different perception of being seen as the opposition to the president. So this is from Politico, which is not a right-wing publication. If the White House Correspondents' Dinner did anything tonight, it made the chasm between journalists and those who don't trust us even wider, tweeted Meg Kinnard, a South Carolina-based reporter for the Associated Press. And those of the this is from the AP. It's not from Breitbart. It's not from Western journalism, which I personally like Western journalism a little more than Breitbart. And if you're going to talk about which publications on the right I actually read. And I usually don't share them, but I still read them. And those of us based in the red states who work hard every day to prove our objectivity will have to deal with it. New York Times White House reporter Peter Baker concluded on Twitter after the event, unfortunately, I don't think we advanced the cause of journalism tonight. And Baker suggested in a reply to comedian Kathy Griffin that he'd vote to leave the comedy acts to comedy shows and stick to journalism at journalism dinners. And then John Harwood, who was a huge Clintonite during the campaign, and actually, I believe he actually leaked information to the Clinton campaign during the campaign. WikiLeaks caught him, so he said First Amendment would probably be okay without the dinner. Controversies emanating from the evening are nothing new. In 2006, Colbert Report host Stephen Colbert stayed in character as he scorched President George W. Bush and his administration, along with the press, for its coverage during the run-up to the Iraq War. Years later, Colbert said people still ask him what Bush, who was seated just steps away, told him after the routine. In 2016, comedian Larry Wilmore ended his jokes by saluting President Barack Obama, who was attending his final WHCD in office, with, "Yo, Barry, you did it, my Enner, you did it." I remember that one. That was a huge controversy. After the hand-wringing over his use of the N-word, Wilmore defended his decision, saying he was trying to take back a word that had been used to denigrate black men for centuries. Well, I mean, they were doing it 20 years ago. Why do they need Larry Wilmore to do it? Who, by the way, Larry Wilmore, for those of you that don't know, is not one of those from the streets guys. I mean, he grew up, went to private schools, went to private universities, and has never. He's if you want to talk about the school of hard knocks, Larry Wilmore isn't the person you want to talk about. Here, I can just pull up his profile here. Yeah, he went to Cal State Polytechnic in Pomona. He grew up in suburban Pomona, California, and says he was a nerd. Studied theater at Cal State Pomona. This isn't exactly Ice-T here. The guy is he's saying, oh, I'm taking back the N-word. Somebody already took it back. Thank you very much. That was his contribution at the press dinner in 2016, I think. But Saturday was supposed to be different. In 2017, President Donald Trump became the first president since Ronald Reagan in 1981 to skip the gathering, although Reagan, who was recovering from an assassination attempt, still called in, and not a single Trump White House aide attended. This year, though, White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders sat at the head table, and Counselor Kellyanne Conway told reporters beforehand that Trump encouraged his staff to attend. So she said, he encouraged us to have fun, Conway told CNN before the festivities began. So then you had some reaction from the other side, from the conservative side. So the other press, the AP, the New York Times, NBC or CNBC, they'd already commented, oh, this isn't really good. Let's see how the conservatives react. So as expected, Sean Spicer, who preceded Sarah Huckabee Sanders as the White House press secretary, said tonight's WHCD was a disgrace, referring to the dinner. White House Director of Strategic Communications Mercedes Schlapp and her husband, conservative activist Matt Schlapp, walked out early. That's like a really German name, Schlapp. Enough of elites mocking all of us, he tweeted. Still, the Schlapps later attended NBC and MSNBC's after party. So, some of these are I get it that you're a little pissed, but I think you're not really pissed. You're a little, but not enough to actually take a stand. Former Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, who everybody used to call Reince Penis, characterized the event after. I hated him. I thought it was the worst pick, one of the worst picks from Donald Trump. The worst would be Rex Tillerson. So he characterized the event afterward on Twitter as another victory for real Donald Trump for not attending and proving his point once again. For the second year, Trump skipped the dinner and counter-programmed it by holding a rally in which he vilified the dishonest and phony press and portrayed journalists as opposed to his presidency. Well, Wolf certainly had tough words for Trump. Her jokes about Sanders' appearance in comparison to Uncle Tom. Oh, okay. So I'll talk about that in a second. For white women, left many journalists uneasy. That press secretary sat and absorbed intense criticism of her physical appearance, her job performance, and so forth, instead of walking out on national television was impressive. New York Times White House correspondent Maggie Haberman wrote on Twitter, a feeling many of her colleagues echoed. She killed her own message, wrote freelance journalist and author Seamus McGraw of Wolf's Routine. Wolf replied to Haberman that the Sanders jokes were about her despicable behavior rather than her appearance. For all the early recriminations, some journalists and liberal commentators wondered whether journalists understood that the evening was intended to be in jest and that the administration remains deeply unpopular. How self-regarding do you have to be to invite a comedian and then get upset that she makes jokes about the rich, famous, and powerful people in the room? Tweeted The Intercept's Glenn Greenwald. And how irrational do you have to be to think a comedian at a DC event is to be reverent and sober in the Trump era? I don't think you fully appreciate the resentment towards media for normalizing the White House's behavior, said longtime military Hillary Clinton aide Philippe Reyes wrote on Twitter and replied to CNN's Jeff Zeleny and Baker. There's a no greater example than Sanders mocking you daily for the whole country to watch. Comedians have long complained that pleasing the audience in the Washington Hilton is a near impossible act, leading Griffin to suggest. So they're asking Kathy Griffin, or they're looking at her tweets to suggest it would be better for everyone to just have another, quote, boring evening. So she said, if you want to focus on the journalism, do a boring awards show. Journalism is all about the First Amendment, Griffin wrote on Twitter. If you don't see the import of what Michelle is a Wolf did tonight, then you don't get it. So here's my reaction to this. Why did they pick Michelle Wolf, who is a bit player on the Daily Show? Nobody ever. I haven't heard of her before. In fact, when I heard her voice, watching the clip, it seemed to me like they were picking somebody who was as close as possible to Kathy Griffin as you could get. Just annoying, screechy, very self-important. There is a type of comedy where that is kind of that's the method. Joan Rivers used to do it. She'd insult the person. She'd be like, "Oh, Michelle Obama, she has a cock or whatever," and then she'd be like, "Oh," that was the annoying thing. I think I pretty much that was Joan Rivers' routine. She would laugh at her own joke in the most obnoxious way, and that was the whole point of it. So, this was their intention in putting Michelle Wolf there, somebody who was as abrasive, as much of an attack dog as possible, to directly attack Sarah Huckabee Sanders to her face. And what they really wanted was to engender a reaction from her that would be they could use against her. And it's sort of backfired. And I want to tell you that the value of this White House Correspondents' Dinner has been transformed. Some people think that it's about comedians roasting the White House and roasting the media. And she actually did roast, I think it was CNN, but she said something about them their journalism being destroyed or something, or they have destroyed journalism or something. So it's not as if the entire evening was a bad performance on her part, but the intention is not actually that. The intention nowadays is to actually use this dinner in order to launch the careers of people that the government wants to be the next big thing. So I'll read to you a list of some of the earlier people who were hosting the dinner. So there was Paula Poundstone in 1992. So they picked her. She's a lesbian comedian. I think she's gay. It says she's asexual, but I heard that she used to harass women or something. But in any case, so there was Paula Poundstone in 1992, 1993 Elaine Boozler. So nobody's ever heard of her. So you had Al Franken in 1994. This was under President Clinton. Before that, you had Dick Cavett, Jay Leno, Yakov Smirnoff. Everybody knows that in Soviet Russia, pump purges you. Things like that. that was his. Those are good jokes, but it's the same joke every time. It's like, his biggest joke was, I come to America first day. I get out of the plane. I drive down I get into the bus and it drives down the street. I see a billboard that says America loves Smirnoff. I think, hey, what a country. That's me. I mean, I just did his entire act there, but it was a good act, and you could get you could laugh it for hours. Eventually people got tired. What are you gonna do? So then you had after Elaine Boozler, you had Al Franken of recent memory, Conan O'Brien, who I have always been kind of a fan of his comedy, especially his stand-up. Regardless of the politics, I think Conan O'Brien is very good. Al Franken again in 1996. Jon Stewart. So notice a pattern. Al Franken is a former Saturday Night Live guy. 1991 was Sinbad. So in 1991, they actually gave it to somebody who was a little more on the alternative comedy set. for a while. Um, Conan O'Brien, I think, was a writer on SNL. He was never a performer. Ray Romano in 1998. By the way, in 1997 was Jon Stewart, and that was before he was really famous. And Norm Macdonald delivered a Weekend Update parody that I remember just that Clintons hated it. They were like, "Oh, we're never gonna have this bastard back. He's done, done. He's dead, dead to us." Because Norm Macdonald was universally, he was kind of the guy who would actually go after the Clintons on Saturday Night Live at the time, and people say that that's one of the reasons he got fired. And by the way, Norm Macdonald, if you look at his old material, uh, and up to this day, he still has the same quality and the same what do you call it, spontaneity about it. So then Aretha Franklin, for some reason, in 1999, after Ray Romano, Jay Leno, Daryl Hammond, Drew Carey, Ray Charles, for some reason, in 2003, Jay Leno again, 2005, Cedric the Entertainer. That's a good pick. He was in Barbershop, I think, before that. Stephen Colbert in 2006. And he got some of Bush's people to walk out. And then Rich Little, who I don't know who he is. And Craig Ferguson, a fantastic comedian, in 2008. Wanda Sykes in 2009. Also good. Jay Leno, but most of these people had been established already. Seth Meyers in 2011, another Saturday Night Live guy, established already. So that was before the Osama bin Laden assassination. Jimmy Kimmel in 2012, Conan O'Brien. So Jimmy Kimmel, another guy established. Conan O'Brien in 2013. So that's his third time. Then they had Joel McHale, who this was in 2014, who was on Community, who's a good guy. I don't know how his performance was. Then in 2015, they give it to Cecily Strong, who again, who cares what Cecily Strong thinks? I mean, she was in Saturday Night Live. Nobody knows anything about anything. I mean, can you name an important movie she's been in? Can you name anything that she's done that's been like an act? Oh, that's the Cecily Strong moment. I can't. Larry Wilmore in 2016, already remembered him. Can anybody remember last year's? This is the exercise for today. Who was last year's White House Correspondents' Dinner? There's a very important reason why I'm asking this right now. Can anybody say who was 2017's White House Correspondents' Dinner person? I'll give you a few seconds. I'm looking at the chat. Don't cheat. Don't go on Google. Just think. I'll give you, and I'm looking at the poll too at the moment. So it looks like most of you want 9:30 Eastern, followed by 11:30 Eastern, which is late. So a lot of you are late, people like me. You have one people at 12 p.m. Eastern, nobody at 6, one person at 1 p.m. And by the way, you can do multiple votes, so it might be still like 3 people voted or something. So I'm going to be looking at this over the next, let's say, 2 days. Let me go back here. So Sam Hyde. I love it when people use the Sam Hyde troll thing. It might as well have been Sam Hyde, because Arjun Sinha, I think he probably cheated, but yeah. Or maybe you knew it because he is an Indian American. Hassan Minhaj was the guy, and people made a big deal about it, because the guy was constantly harping on the fact, I'm a Muslim, Donald Trump is screwing me, Muslim, 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 Islam, 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 Allah, Allah, Allah. That was the whole thing. And Larry Gerke has a great Yakov Smirnov joke there in the chat. But look, Hassan Minhaj is the whole point of why he was picked was because, first of all, it is meant to promote comics who they want to get noticed and put on Netflix. And look, he got his Netflix special, and apparently it got a lot of traffic. And since then, you haven't heard shit from him because the value of it is so inflated. It's basically a way for a young comedian who's already connected through the Daily Show to basically get on their knees and service the liberal country, and the liberal media and the liberal public, and say, give me a chance, I want to be on Netflix. That's the whole purpose behind hosting the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And look, Hassan Minhaj, good for you. I mean, and somebody said something, Jeffrey Allen Johnson, about Islam. I'm fine with people being Muslim and wanting to practice their own religion, but when you have an entire act that's raw and raunchy and whatever, and you talk about Trump and hookers and stuff like that, and getting peed on and stuff, something, and that's the environment you're in. And then you want to talk about Islam, which is supposedly one of the more modesty centralized religions in the world. Well, you're not really a Muslim comedian, are you? You're a comedian that happens to come from a Muslim family from India, and that's about it. So stop with the butt hurt. That was what I got from last year. The guy was basically, read the book, man. No, I'm just saying that I'm I personally don't care as much as other people, but I agree with a lot of the issues people have with Islam. The issue that I'm having here with this specific case, so just so you understand, is that you have a person who puts himself forward. I'm the Muslim comedian. Look at me. I'm representing the resistance to Trump's discrimination against Islam. Well, in reality, he doesn't represent anything about Islam. He represents somebody who comes from the Islamic culture back in India, where he comes from. Well, look, the truth of the matter is that this guy was he himself was the joke, and the whole time, I can show you his face. This is a guy whose entire act is based on his looking at the audience and just smiling at them and laugh at me, laugh at this, whatever. He's the classic. He's the person who is basically a produced item for the media to fawn over, the same way that Kaiser Khan, remember that family of bereaved, the Gold Star family during the campaign. I appreciate the loss, but they were people. The point of them coming out had nothing to do with standing up for their son. It was blatantly a grab for publicity, because people didn't nearly give the same amount of respect for the families of the Benghazi people. And that was something that Hillary Clinton was directly involved in. The only reason they were featuring the Kaiser Khan family, or the Khan family, Kaiser Khan was the father, was because he happened to be Muslim and he hated Donald Trump. Otherwise, there was no connection between him and Donald Trump. Whereas with the Benghazi families, they did have a connection with Hillary Clinton. I mean, would you all agree that was the reason that was featured? I'm not talking about Islam as a religion at the moment. I'm talking about, why are these people put in front of the cameras and given this platform? The reason to do this is in order to convey a message that these are the people standing up to this bully, and we are going to give them as much of a platform and as much time as possible. It doesn't matter that they themselves are from the upper crust of Pakistani society or Indian society. In the case of Hassan Minhaj, his family immigrated to UC Davis, and or Davis, California, and his father was a chemist. I read his biography. His mother was a doctor. He went to UC Davis, which is it's not the cheapest school to go to. And this isn't a person who comes from America's underclass or even India's underclass. This is a person who is is probably more privileged than many of you in the audience. And when they bandy about the concept of privilege and who gets to say what, notice who makes the accusation. Notice the fact that last year was Hassan Minhaj. This year it's this Michelle Wolf. This Michelle Wolf, she started saying jokes about how Sarah Huckabee Sanders is the anti-Coulter, like the equivalent of the Uncle Tom for white women. And I don't know whether to call you Sarah Sanders or Sarah Huckabee or Cousin Sanders or whatever, which is a more of a riff on her Southern heritage. Oh, you had sex with your cousin or something. It was blatantly just it was a personal attack on her, going at every single angle that you could go at for somebody who is sitting there right in front of you. And and Catherine Horace says, stand with Sarah Sanders. Well, I have to, in this case, I do stand with Sarah Sanders. I do think it was a bit of a, it was too desperate of an attack. You can be that insult comedian, and I'll still stand up for the First Amendment. I just think it's stupid. I think it's stupid to go after somebody who, her whole job is to convey messages from the administration, and go after her not based on those messages, not based on the things that she actually does in her job, which the only thing she said about that was that it was lies. But to go after her for being a white woman and for being an anti-Coulter, that's what she called her, and for being fat and whatever. I remember when people were talking about Amy Schumer, we weren't supposed to call her fat, and she's a comedian. Remember that? We weren't supposed to call her Miss Piggy, right? Does anybody remember that? Amy Schumer, who's technically Michelle Wolf's, superior officer in this army of liberal comedians. So she would be kind of a 4-star supernova general. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, why do we have to take cues from these people when they say, oh, you can't attack Sarah or sorry, Amy Schumer because of her weight? Then they go and attack Sarah Sanders because of her weight. Melissa McCarthy, who I think is a great comedian. I think I would hope that she starts to avoid political comedy and doesn't engage in it anymore, because it's a waste of talent on her part. It's not an issue of freedom of speech; it's a waste of talent. So I was going to say something else about this. And if you were going to attack anybody for lies in the room, this is what I was going to say. If she was going to attack anybody for lies in the room, she would have to attack the entire room. Sarah Sanders, let's be honest, probably has said a couple lies on the podium as press secretary. We don't know. Some of them are probably deliberate. Some of them are maybe slips of the tongue. However, you're talking to a room of people who have gotten so many things wrong about the administration over less than 2 years, and have said things and used their news platform as a vehicle for their opinion, that you can't accuse the press secretary of lying in a room full of other people that have worked parallel to her that have also been lying. It's such a contradiction of treatment. They've turned her into a whipping boy. The term whipping boy. What was the what's the root of that expression? It used to be in the Middle Ages, up through the Renaissance, that when a rich child was being educated and he couldn't be whipped, there would be another person who was in the same room who would technically learn with him, who would be usually a boy of the same age, who would be whipped instead of him, and that sight would hopefully force this richer child to be better at his studies. And that's where the term the whipping boy came from. Well, they turned Sarah Sanders into the whipping boy, and the rich children in the audience. Remember, the rich children in the audience, they didn't get anything. They didn't. I think some of them did learn from this. So the ones that commented, this is a little too over the top. This is a little too personal. They know. They're saying this. We struggle all the time to be able to connect with the audience, the audience of people that are reading our articles, the audience of people who are watching our broadcasts, the audience of people who are listening on the radio to us. And now, how are we supposed to do our jobs and report fairly from the White House and convince people, if we can't report fairly because we're opinionated, to convince people that we report fairly? when we bring people from the White House, such as Sarah Sanders and Kellyanne Conway, here, and we basically treat them like dirt. It wasn't a civil, discourse. And Glenn Greenwald, he says, well, how are people supposed to treat them? Well, the truth is, Glenn Greenwald, if he's coming to the defense of this comedian, I think that if he were treated this way by the comedian, he would probably say that it's the liberal oppression of progressives. Okay, so I think that this, we can't declare to people, oh, you can't talk like this. You can't say this in a comic act at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, but you can criticize the effect that it had, and the effect that it had was to punctuate the fact that a working woman and mother who is the White House press secretary for Donald Trump will be used by the liberal media as a target for as long as she works there. And that's what Donald Trump wanted Sarah Sanders to understand from there. That's what he wanted Kellyanne Conway to understand from that event. What she said, Kellyanne Conway, she said, well, President Trump encourages us to go out and socialize and have fun. That's not really why President Trump did that. President Trump had his aides go to this dinner so that he could, when they come back, he would say, look, I need you, and I think you're giving us your best. I really appreciate you, Kellyanne, for the work that you do. By the way, Kellyanne Conway, I'm not crazy about her work. I'm not crazy about. I mean, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, I think, does a great job. I'm not one of these fanboys who says, "Oh, these people are amazing." But the ultimate point here is that they now come back to the White House, and they say, and he says to them, "Look at how they treat you. They don't just hate me. They hate all of us. We're here as a family. I am your brother, and you are my sisters and brothers," because there were probably some male aides there too. And we're here to help the country, and we're here to serve the country, not to serve those whores in the audience at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. No, we're not committed. We're not. Our responsibility is not to the media. Our responsibility is to the people that elected me as president. I'm speaking as Donald Trump, and to the Constitution of the United States. That is what I believe is the message behind it, and I could be wrong. But what a statement these people at the dinner made to Sarah Sanders and Kellyanne Conway and the people who watched it. The people out in Louisiana and in Kansas and everywhere else. Carlos 77X, I missed the old days of the Colbert Report, quality satire. Yeah. Well, the Colbert Report was a fresh product back at the time. You're absolutely right. But if you brought back the Colbert Report today, it wouldn't work the same way. It would kind of fall flat because it's over. The Colbert Report was a product of the Bill O'Reilly era. So now that Bill O'Reilly is gone, you do have Jordan Klepper on Comedy Central, who's trying to do the same thing, but with Alex Jones, and it just isn't working. It's not hitting. People don't even care. It sounds more like the Colbert Report, but rebooted, and it just doesn't work. Jeffrey Allen Johnson says, many of us have ditched Lionel for good, pretentious little prick. Well, I watch Lionel once in a while. I wish he gave a little more support for smaller creators like myself. But, I do find a lot of important things coming from him, and I like it. I like it. But yeah, Carlos 77X, who's been on this show several times, Carlos Cordova. The Colbert Report was a great show for its time. Nowadays, it would probably fall flat. Stephen Colbert has alienated a lot of the audience. Conservatives. At the time, I was a Bill O'Reilly watcher. I would watch the show. I didn't necessarily believe everything O'Reilly said, and then later I'd watch Colbert Report. I'd be like, yeah, I like both of these. And O'Reilly even had Stephen Colbert on his show. So, it was a slightly different time. It was a little less polarized than it is today. So, yeah, I think that the Colbert Report was a good product for its time, but it won't work today. So, what are the other issues here? Let me see if Arjun is still in the audience. He wanted to come on. I don't know if Carlos wants to come on, but I know he's a busy, busy man out there in California. He's like, you know, he's like Raul Mondesi out in the outfield for the Dodgers, you know, shagging those fly balls. Some of you might not remember Raul Mondesi. He was an amazing outfielder. He could go all the way to the warning track and catch a fly ball, throw it straight to the plate, and you know, that sacrifice fly was a non-starter with him. If you were hitting the ball into the outfield with a man on third and Raul Mondesi was in the outfield, you were still fucked. There was nothing to do. So Arjun, you want to come on now? Probably talk a bit. Let me see where I can send this. Do you want it in Discord or do you want it in Facebook? By the way, everybody, the next poll, for those of you that don't know, if you haven't voted in the poll, it's the first poll below. The next poll I'll probably release the next day. It'll be about which, you know, which new platform you want to join. So, you know, it'll be GAB, it'll be minds.com, because we're not going to, we're you know, the amount that I use Facebook for is so, the amount of work I use Facebook for now is really decreasing, because you just don't get any exposure. They don't help you at all. They actually throttle your views more than I've ever seen before. Trump appeared on Colbert before he got the nomination, and Colbert was nice and supportive. Now CBS hides that episode. Yeah, I saw that footage too, and you know, it's just indicative of how they've become. Let me just put on my headset, because I like, when I'm talking to somebody directly, I like using a headset. And then the next topic we're going to talk about is Joy Reid. Can you guys hear me? Press 1 if you can hear me. Okay, so we're going to talk a little about Joy Reid, who I was watching. Thank you. Thanks everybody for replying. Now we're going to talk a little about Russia, but the Joy Reid scandal is a funny scandal for me. And I know some people will say, oh, this isn't really an issue. That's why I led the show with an issue, which was the Department of Education, which I think we don't talk enough about the Department of Education. So for those of you that have missed it, earlier in probably for the first half hour, I talked about abolishing the Department of Education, which I'm extremely in favor of. Let's see here. Arjun. Second. Okay, so I think I need to send it to him in Discord. That'll take a second. So Joy Reid has been saying, oh, I don't believe that I really wrote those things. I don't believe that those things came from me. And if that is not the biggest load of bullshit you've ever heard in your life, you must be from, you know, you must be one of those people from Superman, you know, General Zod and his two freak bodyguards or something. You know, I think that was that Superman 1? Because that is, you know, it's below the dignity of the audience when you say that something that appeared on your blog, you don't believe you actually wrote those things. That, you know, it was on your blog, and apparently she's backtracked since then on the whole Department of Education thing. Let me see here. Larry Gerke is sharing a video. What's that video about? I mean, what's the point of sharing that? Let me just ask you. What's it about? Is it some sort of surprise? Lennon McCarthy says, didn't she admit it though? I wanted her to deny it for a year. Let me see. Carlos, did you answer? Oh no. So Joy Reid is running scared since her hacking excuse didn't work. Now why is the FBI involved? So yeah, the issue, and we're having Arjun join in a second. The issue with that is technically now she's filed a false report to the FBI, and if she retracts her whole hacking story, welcome Arjun from Calcutta, the city by the bay, as they is there a bay over there? I don't even remember. Is it the Bay of Bengal?
Yeah, it's the Bay of Bengal, but it's like 150 kilometers away. Or how much is that in miles? I don't know.
Okay, so it's the city 100 kilometers inland from the bay. So it's not exactly San Francisco.
Not exactly.
Okay, so Larry, I'll check that. I'll try to check that out, Larry. Joy Behar is another comedian that I hate. So Arjun, where do you want to start off? I'm still talking about I know that you were tuning in earlier. Joyanne Reid reported to the FBI that her blog was hacked because she said a bunch of anti-gay things. Have you heard about that story? Do you know who Joyanne Reid is?
Joyanne Reid. The name is familiar, but I don't recall.
So I'll show you the face here. Let me see here. Gotta get this off screen. So I'll give you the context here, and I'm gonna look at your facial reactions after I get this off screen. So this is Joyanne Reid here. The
Oh yeah, I know who she is.
The lady on the left. Okay, we can't use or the human on the left. We can't use gender or racial pronouns. So she is on my left, and then you have this other woman of the paler skin complexion on the right from Arkansas.
Yeah, it's dangerous to use identifiers, so like be careful.
Right. So it's on my right. It's on my left is Joyanne Reid, and on my right is the person who looks like Paula Deen, but significantly less happy. And the thing is, I can't play on Google Hangouts live audio or audio at all because you guys won't hear it. But what happened was she said a bunch of derogatory things about gays and about Brokeback Mountain, which I remember this hilarious story somebody told me about that movie once. But maybe I'll tell it later so I don't get distracted. But she basically she said she read this apology. She said, "A community that I support and that I deeply care about is hurting because of some despicable and truly offensive posts being attributed to me." So look at this. This is important wording, being attributed to me. And many of you have seen, so she's not admitting that she wrote it, and many of you have seen the blog posts circulating online and in social media. Many of them are homophobic, discriminatory, and outright weird and hateful. When a friend found them in December and sent them to me, I was stunned. Frankly, I couldn't imagine where they came from. Again, I couldn't imagine where they came from or whose voice that was. In the months since, I spent a lot of time trying to make sense of the posts. I hired cybersecurity experts to see if somebody manipulated my words or former blog, and the reality is they have not been able to prove it. But here's what I know. I genuinely do. Okay, here's the kicker. I genuinely do not believe I wrote those hateful things because they're completely alien to me, but I can definitely understand based on the things I have tweeted and I have written in the past why some people don't believe me. I have not been exempt from being dumb or cruel or hurtful to the very people that I want to advocate for. I own that. I get it. And for that, I am truly, truly sorry. So Arjun, I'm going to put you in let's imagine that you are the priest in the church listening to confession. Do you buy that confession? Is it even a confession?
Yeah, I'd tell her to add like 10 Hail Marys more for lying. for lying to a priest, I would like to say, do 10 more Hail Marys. So yeah, you know how I know about Joyanne Reid? Like she became before Trump got elected, she was on Bill Maher's show, and when it was suggested that Trump might win, she laughed with this very weird expression on her face, as if it was the most ridiculous thing ever suggested. And then when Trump won, that laugh of hers, that her laughing at the suggestion of Trump being elected as president, was used in a bunch of like those gloating videos where those conservative guys uploaded, like the liberals gloating about Trump, like something like that. So I know Joy Reid from there. I've seen her in multiple videos where that laugh has been used as a meme. Yeah, that one. That's exactly that.
Yeah, this is this everybody knows this one too. It was used in a ton of compilations of footage, especially
Tons of
from.
them.
It was her and Ann Coulter that night, and everybody remembers her looking at the camera and just laughing as if somebody had just said that they'd arrived from Pluto on a spaceship or something. So yeah, that's exactly, and I think the shoe is on the other foot now, because now nobody, back then the whole point was nobody could believe that Donald Trump would be elected president. Now Donald Trump has been elected president, and nobody believes Joy-Ann Reid's nonsense about I was hacked, and people people they must believe me or whatever. I hired cybersecurity experts or whatever. Well,
can I ask a question about Joy Reid here? See, the thing about her is she's a black? Is she a devout Christian by any chance? Because blacks do go to church.
Well, I mean that costs you 75 points of political correctness for today, Arjun, and
No, because no, I'm sorry for being politically incorrect. But the fact is that if she goes to church, then maybe that homophobia stems from there. Like, she has to maintain one persona in the liberal sphere as part of as part of the media establishment, and then one persona as part of her whatever devout Christian community.
Okay, so for the purposes of this exercise, let's imagine that Joy-Ann Reid is Mitt Romney, so we may examine her history. And I have her biography here. It says her father was from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and her mother, a college professor and nutritionist from British Guiana. The two met in graduate school at the University of Iowa. She was born in Brooklyn, raised a Methodist. So Methodism, for those of you that don't know, is one of the more, it's a mainline Protestant denomination. So they're a little more liberal than the other ones.
Okay, so no chance of her being
what's that?
So there's no chance of her being a devout, like one of those hardliner Christians.
Well, there's definitely. I mean, some of the more hardcore Methodists, I don't think that they even believe in dancing. But based on her, her life since becoming a media figure, I don't think, especially if you work on MSNBC, you can't really be a devout Christian. I think that they would probably bounce you at a certain point. That they don't. MSNBC is very hostile to religion. They have people on like Chris Hayes and Rachel Maddow that are basically they promote kind of this lazy atheism. And by the way, if you take like some of the more hard-thinking atheists like Sam Harris or Richard Dawkins, I don't think that they would be welcome on it either, because they would also criticize Islam. They would probably criticize other aspects of liberalism that might be too irrational as well. So yeah, I don't think that she's a devout Christian, so far as I know. So I could be wrong.
No, but that's where the persona thing comes in. No, that she has to pretend to be one thing for work purposes, and then to fit in with her family, she has to be. Because see, there are social compulsions like that. Because why would she make why would she make homophobic, write a homophobic blog? Why would she do that? There has to be some explanation for that, or a person, even a mad person, has some logic to what he says or does.
Well, look, in the culture that I grew up in, there was more and more emphasis on tolerating homosexuals, but for a long time you could still make fun of them. And for example, there was a show when I grew up, a great show, fantastic show. Jim Carrey came out of it. Damon Wayans, who's the other guy? David Alan Grier. A lot of great comedians, black comedians, and Jim Carrey, called In Living Color. And they had I'll show you, again, I can't show video, but they had this skit on it called men on film, and it was these two, it was Damon Wayans and David Alan Grier. I'll open it in a different window. Let me close this window. I'm getting like so many windows here. I might as well be, Buckingham Palace. So it was these two, and they were just flamboyantly gay guys who were just they would make fun of movies, and it was the funniest skit ever. And whether you were a Christian or you were pro-gay, I think most people would laugh at it and they'd say, "Oh, this was hilarious." If they did that today, they would be banned from TV forever. It was, and these were two comedians that they were on the cutting edge at the time. They were. It was amazing. It was amazing the type of stuff that they would put on that show. And they had also here's another one.
I don't know if they would be banned, because like recently, see, on Family Guy, they recently did an episode where they made fun of, they did a Sherlock Holmes episode where they made fun of Oscar Wilde in that, where Stewie says that, okay, get Oscar Wilde out of here or we'll be arrested for bum fancy. So in Victorian England. So even Seth MacFarlane makes fun of homosexuals like all the time.
I think with Seth MacFarlane, he's gotten to a point in his career where he's probably got such a huge contract, and he's probably got dirt on the company that's so toxic that they can't fire him. So this was Jim Carrey's character back then, the female bodybuilder, and nowadays again, whether you hate transsexuals, whether you like transsexuals. Back when I was a kid, this was considered hilarious. I was 7 years old when this was on. I was laughing at the screen because my parents didn't really monitor my TV watching. I was like, this is the funniest shit I've ever seen. This one and every skit that they did on that show was great. So, and not all of them were about making fun of gay people. That was an amazing show. Now that Petzella says Jamie Foxx was hilarious as Ugly Wanda. I remember that too. Let's bring up Ugly Wanda. The Ugly Wanda was like a character that she was a woman that would hit on dudes, and you had
constantly get rejected.
Yeah, or these guys would be at a party and they'd be drinking and saying, "Oh, let's pick up some chicks today. Let's find some drunk ones," and then this would walk up to them, and it was an amazing show that today would have never made it on the air if it was proposed. And that's the way our culture has changed. And if you really want to talk about acceptable comedy and whether the First Amendment is really as protected as it used to be, look at Larry Gerke. He even brought up the Apu situation with you're from India. Do you watch The Simpsons?
Yeah, I used to, but then I stopped watching it precisely because of Apu. Like, okay. Now the fact is that there are two ways of looking at this Apu situation, right? That okay, he's an intelligent character who is capable, who runs his own business. He's a model immigrant. He's all that, right? The problem with Apu is not about the bullying aspect of it. That people make fun of Indians because of that. It is because okay, fine. Simpsons equally makes fun of every sort of denomination equally. That's fine. Even if you make fun of Indians, that's also fine. But if Apu is the only representative, means you're showing like an entire community with only one representative in that way, even though he has many positive qualities. But you're sort of underplaying all those positive qualities by one thing. But there are many things to appreciate about Apu. The other thing is that they really botched up the religious references. The religious references, that part got to me actually. That if you want to talk about immigrants and make fun of him as a stereotype, don't get the religion involved. Don't get Hindu figures. Don't involve Vishnu. Don't involve all that sort of thing. That's something that.
So that's my take. That's interesting because you look at it more of an issue of how they misrepresent your religion as opposed to your ethnic group.
Yeah, those are two different things.
But would you say that the correct way to address this is changing the actor who portrayed Apu, who is currently a white guy?
No, I don't think, see, even if it is played by a white guy, see, that is not the problem. The problem is not the stereotype, right? The problem is the lack of representation. Like, see, not all Indians are like that, right? That you have a lot of Indian friends in America. Are all of them are all of them the same, right? Not all of them.
Say that again.
Different.
Yeah,
see,
yeah.
All of them.
I would say, and the same thing. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of people who, they look at Latinos as the same thing, but when I talk to a Cuban American as opposed to somebody who's visiting here from Guatemala, there's very little in common, very, very little.
See, that's the thing, and the other thing is that his name is a nonsense name. His surname, Apu's surname, is a nonsense name. First of all, he's marketed as as a South Indian. Yeah. He's said it according to his name, he's a South Indian. But his surname is nonsense. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a bunch of syllables. His first name is a Bengali surname. Apu is a Bengali name. It is from Opu. Opu is that too is not a proper name. It's a nickname.
Mm-hmm.
So see, if you want to do stereotypes. But like, I'm not saying like have 50 characters representing different aspects of India. Have 2, have 3 representing different aspects of Indians.
But would you say that you actually felt harmed by the show because of the Apu issue, or would you say like you just thought it was stupid and you stopped watching?
No, but Simpsons has an array of white characters, right? An array of white characters showing different stereotypes of whites.
Right, but in a city, because it portrayed small town America, the idea was that this was, for example, they had one Scottish character, groundskeeper Willie. They had one. They had the Italian chef. Remember the guy with it was also stereotypes of that. So the idea is that those would be the stereotypical people that would live in your town. Okay. And they weren't going for accuracy. They were going for.
Hank Azaria apparently was told make it as offensive as possible, which in itself is not a big issue. The thing is that you see, I'm sure groundskeeper Willie, they got his name right. It was not a nonsense name that they used for groundskeeper Willie. Nor did they use a nonsense name for the Italian guy, right? But they used a nonsense name for an Indian guy. So see, it's not a major issue. We don't care in India. And I was watching Hari Kondabolu's that half whatever documentary he was doing, and see, he seems to be more hurt about the bullying aspect that he has faced. The only point which he made, which is okay, it's a reasonable point to make, is that which I also just made, was that okay, you want to do the Apu thing, you do it. You make a stereotype, you make fun of us, that doesn't matter, right? Just like you make fun of the Scottish through groundkeeper Willie. But you have a balanced representation. It is not that an entire people is just a junk people. It's not that we are not a nonsense people, right? Our beliefs, our names. See, in India, the name is very important because the names are connected to the religion. We take our names very seriously. Like my name, Arjun, right? It's taken very seriously.
Yeah.
So to have a nonsense name like that's a little that sort of that irritates people. But Simpsons has been airing in India for like years now. But then it stopped airing also because people didn't watch it for whatever reason. I don't know. But the racism issue was I don't think it was ever important.
Yeah, I think a lot of this offensive humor or even offensive speech thing is overblown, and it's exploited by people who kind of they want to make an issue of something that isn't an issue. And the same thing happens in the US. There's people who are trying to get Americans not to say Latino or Latina, they say Latinx because it's offensive because the Spanish language is gendered. But if you talk to anybody who is from one of those countries, they're like, it's the dumbest thing you could ever think of, because all of the Romance languages, Italian, Romanian, French, Spanish, Portuguese. They have gendered verbs or not gendered verbs, or gendered nouns. And it's probably one of the most ridiculous cases you can make. So these people are actually making a problem out of something that if they were to get it resolved, it would actually destroy the language. And that's kind of that's how I see that issue. Do you want to let's move topics if you're done with that. I have here, this is from BuzzFeed News. You know, we criticize BuzzFeed.
Most trusted name in news. Trusted name in news.
Oh yeah, they're getting sued, by the way. But this I think is their way of getting revenge. So yeah, revenge on the DNC. So for those of you that don't know, and let me stop sharing for a second. BuzzFeed is suing the DNC because they're getting sued by a bunch of Russian businessmen because of the Pissgate dossier. And their lawsuit is because, you know, they had the Pissgate dossier leaked to them, you know, pardon my French, you know, leaked Pissgate dossier, but they also they believed, I guess in their hearts, that the DNC was hacked, and they need, in order to win their lawsuit, they need substantiation from the DNC through evidence that it was hacked and that something actually happened. And the DNC won't turn over their servers. They won't turn over any evidence. And they're saying, you know, BuzzFeed, you're just going to have to fall on your swords and take this massive penalty from the courts. And BuzzFeed's saying, what do you mean? I mean, we backed up your story back in 2017 when people were thinking, oh, the DNC was hacked. Now help us win this. Help us prove your point. The DNC is saying nothing. So what happens? The Center for American Progress, which, by the way, if you're a Bold Like a Leopard viewer, you're going to be hearing a lot about Center for American Progress in the coming weeks on a totally different issue. And I can't disclose anymore because I'm working with another YouTuber on it. So, you know, but just expect more updates on Center for American Progress and maybe a couple people who are featured here. So, you know, what happened here is inside a divisive fight over how a progressive think tank handled sexual harassment. One of Washington's leading liberal institutions grappled with a divisive internal battle over sexual harassment during and in the aftermath of the 2016 elections, according to documents obtained by BuzzFeed News and interviews with 19 current and former staffers. So it sounds as if, they're claiming that they found a lot of people who worked for the CAP, which was, by the way, founded by John Podesta, who was Bill Clinton's chief of staff. He was also Obama's chief of staff for a couple years. He was Hillary Clinton's campaign manager. He's a major lobbyist. He works for the Washington Post now. Very powerful guy. I'm not going to talk about.
He's as inside as it gets, basically.
Right. He's as inside as it gets. And you know, some people in the chat, I'm not looking at the chat right now, but they're probably going to attribute him to a certain Italian food dish, but I'm not going to talk about it on air. The Center for American I don't know if you're watching the chat, Arjun, but I'm assuming somebody's bringing that up. So the Center for American Progress, the politics and policy hub for the Democratic establishment, has put out four different policy proposal papers on handling sexual harassment in the workplace, as well as data on how pervasive the issue is across all industries. So notice how they generalized. The organization's president, Neera Tanden, who is, by the way, she's second generation Indian American. I think she might have even been born in India. Has vehemently criticized Republicans. So it's good we had you on today, Arjun.
Yeah.
Criticized Republicans for their reaction to the accusations of sexual misconduct against President Donald Trump, and wrote in a tweet still pinned to her profile, "I don't think the country has understood how psychologically wounding it was to so many people that Trump won after the Access Hollywood tape. But only an hour after the Access Hollywood tape was made public, top officials at CAP received an exit memo from a young woman who'd just quit, detailing the sexual harassment she experienced from Benton Strong, a manager on her team. Harassment, she wrote, that management already knew about and how she faced retaliation for reporting it. In the email, the junior staffer who asked the BuzzFeed News refer to her, they typo here, as Mary, which is part of the woman's formal name, wrote that on several occasions, myself and others on the team felt as if reporting had been a mistake and that the retaliation worsening of already tenuous team dynamics and treatment by supervisors outweighed the seemingly positive act of reporting sexual harassment in the workplace. When contacted about this story, the woman confirmed the authenticity of the exit memo, but declined to comment further, except to respond on Saturday to a statement from CAP. So she said, CAP's culture obscures its mission, Mary wrote toward the end of her memo. All this to say, I surely expected better out of an organization that housed a national campaign on sexual assault. And so then it goes into a little about CAP. This is the guy, Benton Strong. I did look for him on Twitter. His profile is now private.
Yeah, he looks guilty.
Well, this is the whole thing. I mean, Arjun, you haven't been listening to this stream for that long, but in the fall, I was talking a lot about the presumption of innocence, which in America is the belief that you're innocent until you're proven guilty. So that's a standard that I believe in. That's not the standard that the Center for American Progress believes in. And now they have to. What's that?
The left never believes in that.
Right. So those of us that in the fall, I was saying with regards to Roy Moore, I was saying with regards to Tavis Smiley, who's a left-wing guy on the radio here. I think, or he might be on PBS, which is the public broadcasting system. I was saying in regards even to Al Franken that everybody's entitled to the presumption of innocence in the criminal justice system here in the U.S. Unfortunately, when it comes to the media, they shit on the presumption of innocence. They say, well, we found this person willing to say this, and we believe this person more than that person, so that therefore that person's guilty. So that's the way they treat it in America. This guy, yeah, it's possible. It's possible. I think you'd agree. It's possible that he harassed this woman, and there's probably a lot of, based on this BuzzFeed report, there's probably, a fair amount of proof of it. But the idea is that we were the ones, those of us that were commenting on this back in the fall, that believed that this whole #MeToo movement was really kind of a crusade and a witch hunt after people. And it's already eaten a lot of these people alive, a lot of these liberals alive. There was Matt Lauer. Now there's Tom Brokaw, who is a news icon here in the U.S., being accused by 2 women of sexual assault. Now there's this guy, Benton Strong. There was Hillary Clinton's spiritual advisor. I forgot his name. It started with like a B or something, from 2008. So for 10 years, or maybe it was 9 years, they concealed sexual harassment in the 2008 Hillary Clinton campaign. So I don't know if you heard about that.
I have a theory about that, but it's more than a theory. It seems to be very true, but I still have very little proof for that. See, this Me Too movement, Harvey Weinstein, who was one of the top donators for the Democratic Party for many years. All these people, this guy, Cenk Uygur, and Kyle Kulinski from Justice, they got expelled from the Justice Democrats. Now, if you see all these guys who got taken down, even in the media who got taken down, this is a movement to remove the current left leadership, right? Even if you hate Cenk Uygur, the fact of the matter is that he's one of the more moderate leftists. Considering how crazy the left is, Cenk Uygur is one of the more moderate leftists, right? Because so the fact is that all these moderate left guys are being removed in a big way, because the far left within the left organizations are saying that the left leadership has failed us, and we need new leadership. And the thing about the left is that whenever they see things not working out for them, they go more left, because they are a very rigid. Their ideology is very rigid. It's like Islam. Islam is very rigid. Whenever they see Islam not working, they become more Islamic. The same way the left becomes more left when they see the left ideology not working. The liberals will become more liberal or go towards far left anarchy and all that, like Antifa and all these guys. So all these guys who are being removed one by one right now are the current leadership who are the moderate left, and they're being replaced slowly and very surreptitiously by rabid elements of the left. Even Joy Reid, no matter how left she was, the fact of the matter was she was still more moderate, right? So they want to replace these current crop of media people and politicians with more rabid left ideologues. That's my reading of the situation.
I think there's an element of what you're talking about at the grassroots level. Absolutely, there's people, for example, the ones who exposed Cenk Uygur, probably some of the people who exposed Joy Reid. They're thinking that this is why, I agree with you. I think the motivation is a little different. In every sphere of influence, there is a desire for a certain portion of the power and the wealth. And being on MSNBC or being on the Young Turks entitles you to, for example, speaking engagements, salaries, corporate events, and things like that. So there are people who are on the lower levels who are jealous of that, and that's a very if you'll excuse me, that I think is an element of being a Marxist or of being a leftist of a less
It's
ideological. Right.
It's
envy.
Yeah.
It's total envy, and or it could be people just out to get them. But the fact of the matter is that these people who are exposing Cenk Uygur or Joanne Reid, a lot of the times their motivation is a little selfish. But ultimately, you have to look at past Marxist movements, or in Islam, there's an element of that too. The purification issue, how to make the movement more ideologically pure, how to glean out people who are what would they call them, bourgeois road. I think they called them roaders in China. So during the Cultural Revolution, they took people who were lifelong committed communists, like Peng Dehuai and Liu Shaoqi, who was technically the president of China, and they embarrassed them publicly. They would throw books at them and make them hold signs saying I'm an asshole and stuff like that as a public embarrassment, in order to, like you said, to till the soil and bring up a new generation of even more fanatical communists. And that was the value of the Cultural Revolution. That's the value nowadays of the Cultural Revolution on the American left. If you look at what happened at Evergreen College, several people who are not right-wingers, they're not people like Ramon, or they're not people like Arjun, I think would count as a right-wing Indian. But a lot of people from there who grew up as progressives, if you watch Benjamin Boyce's channel, and I'll put him in the chat, I've actually had a chat with him from Evergreen College. They will tell you that what they witnessed at Evergreen College or at Yale or at UC Irvine or one of these campuses is consistent with the Cultural Revolution in China. And it is people should be afraid of that type of dynamic in American education, because it means that
I'll give you an example that you used. It caught my attention because the forced busing system that you were talking about in the 60s and 70s, was it the 60s or the 70s? The forced busing, like they would say
the 70s, yeah.
The forced busing technique, just think about it, where was this technique used? In a very famous communist regime, this technique was used, and it caused widespread deaths, like mass deaths.
Under Stalin?
No.
Cambodia?
Yeah.
Stalin also did. He did the same thing with a number of ethnic groups, but yeah.
Yeah, but Pol Pot is more famous for the population exchange thing, and he ended up killing 50% of his country's population, nearly 50%. So this forced busing thing, it caught my attention. These things are there are a lot of techniques which people use in different situations in America. Right now, who was that YouTuber I was watching? Like Republican, like college Republican YouTuber. This girl, I don't know what's her name.
Candace Owens.
The blonde-haired girl, young girl.
Blonde. Let me see.
Ashton
Birdie.
Yeah. Ashton Birdie, yeah. I just happened to see one of her videos where she was walking through campus, and there were like posters idolizing Marx, Stalin, Mao, all these mass murderers. So that's a worrying sign. And then there was this one professor who released a children's book called Communism for Kids. That's a worrying sign.
Yes,
So
and
yeah,
yeah, I would say that I saw this, and you know, I troll these people, but I think that unfortunately the only way to deal with that is to actually drain colleges entirely, and you know, remove a lot of their funding. And we're going to have to go through a transition period
you know what
where.
will bring them down to their knees? This is the like nationalize the endowment.
So for those of you just joining, or those of you that weren't here at the beginning, there is a straw poll in the description for when you want the live stream. It isn't dependent on days yet. You know, if people have problems with whatever day it is, I'm sorry, but you're just gonna have to friggin' deal with it. But you know, I'll show it again on screen just briefly before, you know, we'll go back to our June. So there's 5 possible times for live streams. I see not nobody really wants 6 p.m., but there's 9:30 Eastern, 11:30 Eastern, 12 Eastern, that would be noon, or 1 p.m. Eastern.
I
So
voted for 12 and 1.
well, yeah, 12 and 1, I think some days are good for me at the moment, but we'll see how that works. I would say 9:30 p.m. would, looking forward for the next couple months, would probably be the most frequent, and then you know, but we'll see. If people want a different time, we'll see what we can work out, because the idea is to get as many people to watch live and interact. And you know, I appreciate people's comments even when they call me an asshole. Although when you call me an asshole 15 times in the same comment section, that's called spamming, and I probably would boot you out. So we were talking about
Yeah, we were talking about the
indoctrination.
see what would really bring American colleges to their knees and on track, like in the way the government, the conservative government wants it to come on track. And this is a very fascistic move. You should like, and one idea is that you can nationalize the endowments, because all these guys they control Yale and all these guys, they control $1 billion endowments. Bring the endowments under the Department for Education.
No, I don't think that that's the answer, and I'll explain why.
Yeah.
The issue with endowments is that it's already resolving itself. Some of these colleges that have had these flare-ups of Marxist revolutions, if you can call them, in Evergreen State College, you have to call it a Marxist revolution, because that's exactly what happened. Their donors are fleeing away, so their endowment is shrinking of their own doing. University of Missouri, which is an even bigger case, it's a much larger college. I think they lost 17% of their enrollment the next year. Their donor money dried up. They've had to cut back a lot on their spending because they don't have the money anymore. Because first, and they, you know, the states also cut their funding because they're like, well, you know, we're a state. We have a governor who's a GOP guy now. The state, you know, most the state's legislature is mostly Republican, but now we have to finance a university who ideologically is slanting beyond even the most left of the Democrats. You know, they're basically almost black nationalists over there at the University of Missouri. So they've been cutting the funding, right? So it's like the problem is resolving itself as it is without needing the federal government to get involved. Now, the way that I would say the federal government can change this is if we do see the, first of all, like I said at the beginning, the Department of Education does have to be either abolished or, you know, rolled into something else, because it hasn't helped over the past 50 years, which are the years of its existence. It hasn't helped American education get better on a national level, and if anything, it's gotten in the way of local educational systems from progressing. You know, we've fallen further behind Japan, further behind you know, Europe, India, China in terms of educational standards, but we keep getting these requirements and these regulations from the Department of Education, including Title IX, which did institute a culture of fear about sexual harassment on campus, because you could be accused and basically tried without you know, legal representation on a college campus. So that's what the Department of Education has given us through administrations like Obama and President Carter. President Clinton, I'm not sure if he did much with it, but essentially, I think we're going to roll it up in 10, 15 minutes, Arjun, because I have been on for almost 2 hours. But yeah, we do have to address the issue of what promotes a more free educational system. Is it giving more money from the top? Is it using taxpayer money to promote ideological education, or is it to, say to people, well, if you want this education, if you want this higher education, we can't bloat the system and inflate tuition numbers because we're giving all of these student loans from the federal government. Issues like this is why, and I didn't go so far in depth because there were so many other issues to talk about today. This is why the Department of Education has been a failure consistently since the beginning of its existence. And those people that are trying to say, well, you can't dissolve the Department of Education because it would increase inequality. What I'd like to hear from them is, besides raising more money, besides raising taxes and budgets, what is their alternative solution to the status quo? Because I'm open to ideas. I believe that, I might not be correct. I could be wrong about this issue. I think that it is time to dissolve it, and it's way past due. Arjun, you want to talk about Russia?
Yeah, let's talk about some P-tips.
So Tucker Carlson has officially accused the former head of National Intelligence, Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, of setting up Donald Trump with the P-tape, which doesn't exist, but the PIS dossier, and former CIA Director John Brennan of the same. And here's a statement: after a year of research and interviews, the House Intelligence Committee has finally completed the investigation into that Russian meddling during the 2016 election you've been hearing so much about.
Wasn't James Brennan the guy who said that we should reconsider whether Israel is our ally or not?
John Brennan, he's said a lot of things. He also is really close to Saudi Arabia. And
see, he said, he had said, I remember watching one Senate hearing where he had said that Israel, we should reconsider whether Israel is still our friend or not.
Well, John Brennan, for those of you that don't know, is I did a long form video analysis of his. He had a ridiculous video where him and Clapper appeared with what's the guy's name, Rob Reiner, who's the head of the Committee to Investigate Russia. That's the name of the organization. And basically, it was 23 minutes of them talking about things that Russia did without actually mentioning what they were. And that's been their whole game. Their whole game for the past 2 years has been accusing President Trump and his campaign without actually mentioning what they're talking about, what the campaign did. And they're saying, we have to investigate. We have to really find out what happened. Well, when it comes to them, when it comes to their role, they're very cagey about it, and they like to pretend that they had nothing to do with the PIS tape, the PIS dossier, or whatever, the Horde dossier. I don't know what you want to call it. The Steele dossier is what it's officially called. So they've been. This is their role. They're not here to convict Donald Trump based on the allegations of the PIS dossier. Their intention is to use that as a means to create warrants and create an investigation where they would find a different illegal activity that he engaged in that's completely unrelated. That's why you're hearing so much about the Stormy Daniels payment and about Michael Cohen and stuff like that. The idea is not to catch him for Russian hacking. That's what creates the atmosphere, the idea that Donald Trump is dirty. But they can't convict him of something that they have no proof of. So they have to use this as sort of a tool, as a crowbar to pry open the door, and then they can go after him for actual illegal things that they could possibly find as a collateral issue of this. And that's how they've tried to convict Michael Flynn. That's how they've tried to convict the other guy, Paul Manafort, of crimes that were completely unrelated to Trump, actually more related to the State Department under President Obama. So the whole idea is to paint this on Trump, whether or not it's actually legally something that he's liable for.
Yeah. So, okay, this Russiagate thing carrying on and on. Who does it benefit the most? It benefits Trump the most. You know why? Because more and more people are turning against the democratic establishment every day, and the media every day, because of this Russiagate. Because Trump gets to play the victim. victim is one of the most powerful weapons you have in in your arsenal in politics, right? Like Modi does it all the time. Like the Indian Prime Minister, he does it all the time. Like, whenever these guys say, "Oh, Modi is this, Modi is that," what Modi does is he goes to some part of India. He holds a massive rally where 400,000-500,000 people show up, and then he says, "Look at these elites, or look at what they're calling me. They're insulting me. I'm a poor tea seller. I was a poor tea seller when I was a child. I used to sell tea on a railway station, and I grew up to be prime minister. And look what, and I'm from a backward caste. And look what these elites are telling me, that they're insulting me every day. Them insulting me is basically they're insulting you. That's what he tells the people, and the people just eat it up. This victim thing, right? Now,
Yes,
Trump gets to do this. But Trump is in an ideal situation where he gets to do this, right? He should just play the victim, and he should just hold rally after rally saying, "Look at what these guys are doing to me." And I think he is doing that to a great extent.
So Marshall Gordon is saying it's in the tape. They got the tape. That's what old school black. So he's talking about me, Moody Blues. I've actually never seen the Moody Blues photo. I've just heard their song. What's the one? Nights in White Satin.
White Satin,
yeah. Everybody knows Papadopoulos. They're trying to hide the stories about Papadop in the club. No, that story's been out there, and it just this is what's preposterous about the case. Okay, let's say that this is true with Papadopoulos. Okay, and why do you keep suppressing the stories of Papadopoulos in the club? So let's go over that story. If you think I'm suppressing it, that story is about a person who was an advisor for some sort of body within the Trump campaign who got drunk in a bar in Australia with the Australian former ambassador who is also, I think, let me see here, Alexander Downer. So let me find him. So he's worked for, who was it? Let me see. Alexander Downer, I think, was affiliated with what's that organization? So this is from the Hill from March 5th. The Australian diplomat who prompted FBI's Russia probe has ties to the Clintons. This isn't from Fox News, okay? And Arjun, can you go to the chat? Tell me, because I don't have it on screen. But is Marshall Gordon still in the chat? Because I want to ask him, does he think that this is a credible source? Okay, is he still there?
Yeah, I'm just checking. Let me just open YouTube. I'm doing this from my phone. So let me just check 1 second.
So I'll read this in the meantime. It says, former Australian Foreign Minister Alexander Downer's role in securing $25 million in aid from his country to help the Clinton Foundation fight AIDS is chronicled in decade-old government memos archived on the Australian Foreign Ministry's website. Downer and former President Clinton jointly signed a memorandum of understanding in February 2006 that spread out the grant money over 4 years for a project to provide screening and drug treatment to AIDS patients in Asia. The money was initially allocated to the Clinton Foundation, but later was routed through an affiliate of the charity known as the Clinton Health Access Initiative, CHAI. So CHAI actually means tea in Indian and Russian and a bunch of other languages. Australia was one of 4 foreign governments to donate more than $25 million to CHAI, records show. In the years that followed, the project won praise for helping thousands of HIV-infected patients in Papua New Guinea, Vietnam, China, and Indonesia, but also garnered criticism from auditors about management weaknesses and inadequate budget oversight, the memo shows. Downer, now Australia's ambassador to London, provided the account of a conversation with Trump campaign advisor George Papadopoulos at a London bar in 2016 that became the official reason the FBI opened the Russia counterintelligence probe. But lawmakers say the FBI didn't tell Congress about Downer's prior connection to the Clinton Foundation. Republicans say they are concerned the new information means nearly all of the early evidence the FBI used to justify its election year probe of Trump came from sources supportive of the Clintons, including the controversial Steele dossier. So this is Jim Jordan from my state, Ohio. He says the Clintons' tentacles go everywhere, so that's why it's important, said Representative Jim Jordan, chairman of the House Oversight and Government Reform Subcommittee that has been taking an increasingly visible role in defending the Trump administration and the Russia probe. We continue to get new information every week. It seems that sort of underscores the fact that the FBI hasn't been square with us. So the issue here, and I'll go back to the chat right now and look at Mr. Marshall Gordon. So you're saying this is what I want to understand from Marshall Gordon. Are you trying to imply that words said at a bar in London by an ambassador for a foreign country who reported it to the FBI, are they evidence of a crime? I'd like to hear exactly how is that evidence of a crime? Because the allegation was what? What's the crime? I would like to know what's the crime that you say is proven by something that Papadopoulos said or did. Patsella says, well, okay. So basically, you're suppressing the stories of Papadop. First of all, if you keep calling him Papadop, it just says that you're obsessed with this person. So basically, you're suppressing the stories of Papadop. All of your actions are against my will. No, I'd like you've brought up Papadopoulos. I want to hear what exactly the crime is that Papadopoulos exposes, because the only thing that I've heard was that he requested permission to meet a I think it was a Kremlin-connected advisor in London, and basically everybody was like, "Oh, we're not interested in it." So where's the crime? If he's expressing interest in something and he didn't get his way, and there's no proof of anything actually happening, I want to know where the crime is. That's basically my question. Everybody's like, "Oh, he talked in a club about meeting Russians." Okay, good. Is it a crime to say something in a club about speaking with Russians? Also, what has been uncovered? What became of that? What became of that? Okay, let's look up Papadopoulos. Okay. Let's see here. So the only thing he's been actually pled guilty of was making false statements to the FBI, and that is a crime on his part. It says at the time he was living in London, where he was. Okay, so according to court records, Papadopoulos was recruited to join Trump's foreign policy advisor team in early March 2016 by Sam Clovis in a meeting on March 6th. So he was on an advisor team. Okay, that doesn't mean that he actually had any real influence. In a meeting on March 6th, the official told him that one of the campaign's foreign policy priorities was to improve U.S.-Russia relations, though Clovis later denied having said that. And I don't know if Clovis has actually been, convicted of anything. Donald Trump. What's that?
I'm just want to question, does Donald Trump have the support of any of the investigative agencies? I know that FBI is like in turmoil right now because of leadership changes, and they're mostly like anti-Trump.
No, all of them are basically full of people who leak things to the media, and so far none of it has actually led to evidence of a crime. They'll leak stuff, and it'll be salacious rumors, but the issue is you can leak things about Donald Trump. First of all, the dossier. Their defense of the dossier is that some of the things in it are true. So, if I put out a story and I say Arjun, he woke up on March 15th and he went and, had a panini sandwich for breakfast. And then later he had 3 beers, and then he murdered, Emma Watson. Three of those things can be true. And I could say, well, 3 of those things are true. One of them is not. But some of the facts are corroborated. Well, that's the same standard that they're giving to the dossier. They're saying, well, a couple of these things are true. We should investigate the whole thing. No, once something is tinged by false information, I think that the whole thing becomes suspect.
No, that's why Mueller changed the whole. He shifted goalpost from collusion to obstruction of justice. No, because obstruction of justice allows him to investigate that what all Trump has hidden from him. Instead of saying that Trump colluded, he is now looking for, is there something Trump is hiding?
Well, Marshall Gordon, who was saying, "Oh, talk about Papadopoulos." Well, now I did. He says, "I'm not interested in you anymore. Leave me be." Well, then what do you want me to do? Do you want me to talk about him or not? You know, this is what I don't get. There's people who they say, "Oh, Trump, there's something dirty about Trump." Well, you prove it. If you want to accuse somebody of something, then it's up to you to prove it. It's not, I can go and make salacious rumors about people all day long, but if I can't prove it, then it should affect my credibility. It shouldn't affect the credibility of the person that I can't prove it about.
No, but the whole point is that Trump wants this whole thing to play out like this. It serves him really well. They try to dig up on this guy, on Trump, that more it benefits Trump politically, because people are going to just more and more turn away from this thing. See, the Mueller probe will lose steam at one point. The Mueller probe, if it is not true, if it is not based on truth, then it will lose steam. And one point it has to come out that they've been on a wild goose chase, right?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Arjun. I think you're perceptive of what I think about it. Some people don't get it yet, but the fact is that there are people who would like there to be an alternative to Donald Trump. I wouldn't mind it as well. I do think that there needs to be, different viewpoints presented to, even if it includes leftist viewpoints, so be it, to the public. And they are not being presented because the obsession is about Russia. The obsession is about getting peed on by prostitutes, which isn't even what the dossier says. It says the prostitutes peed on each other. What's the emphasis on? The emphasis is on Jeff Sessions being a racist. That's what it was for 2 weeks when he was being confirmed.
His own black secretary sort of came up and said, no, he's not a racist. He's like one of the.
It's every week. It's a different thing that they throw at the public. Last week, by the way, the new nominee for secretary of the VA, he was accused of sexually harassing a woman by knocking on her door while he was drunk in a hotel or on an airplane or something. It turned out that there was zero proof of the allegations. Nothing. It was based on complete hearsay. So every week, and Trump uses it, and he says, well, look what they did to Ronnie Jackson, who's the guy, the admiral who was nominated to head the VA. They smeared his reputation, and he's actually going after the senator that did it, John Tester of Montana, and he's saying, this is what they do. They will focus on something no matter how weak the proof is, and they're going to make that into an issue. We are going to get them back. And it is obscuring the actual issues. Nobody in the audience today, I believe, actually knew about the department. You can be forgiven because you don't live in this country, Arjun. But some of the people here, I doubt that they know what happened with the Department of Education. I doubt that they heard about the story I talked about earlier this week, that there is a proposal by Democrats in the House to automatically enroll you in Obamacare if you don't have insurance. Okay, so those are the things that are getting obscured. People don't have an agenda. The progressive agenda is being completely buried by the Democratic Party itself. So those people that believe in universal health care, forget it. Forget it. Those of you that think that voting Democrat will get you progressive policies, it's not going to happen. There's been a leaked tape, Arjun, I don't know if you heard about it, a leaked tape of Steny Hoyer, who was a very senior Democratic congressman, saying to a candidate for Congress who's a progressive, he said, well, don't even bother to run because we're going to support the other guy in the primary. And he's the guy that we like, and forget it. We chose him, and we don't know who he is, but we decided that he would do it. So don't even bother to run for the Democratic nomination. So in the progressive people who really pay attention to the news, they'll hear about it because there are some shows like Jimmy Dore or Tim Black or Progressive Soapbox, which is a pretty good show for progressives, where they do expose what.
I don't know about Jimmy Dore. Maybe I don't know. I find that guy to be a little little weird.
The idea isn't to agree with everything they say. It's to get their perspective of the news and figure out what they're thinking about. It's to get into the head of your opponents. And look, I mean, without that, if we stay within our own lane and only look at sources that are quote unquote conservative, then
See,
we're also.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but why are they? The point is that they are the Democratic establishment is bearing the progressive agenda. They sort of nixed Bernie's campaign, and they sort of impeded his campaign. Why? Why do they not want Bernie to come in? Why do they not want the progressive agenda to come back? The very same reason why all these guys are getting chucked out, all these media guys, all these Harvey Weinsteins, all these guys, they're getting chucked out, the Cenk Uyghurs. The left is sort of trying to take over, and the Democratic establishment is trying to fight back and saying, no, we don't want that, because the people don't want that. Because the people are turning more and more conservative, right? Because the people are turning more and more conservative, because of the past progressive and democratic policies, the Democratic Party is sort of fighting for survival and fighting for relevance. So if they go more left, the Democratic leadership understands that they will get wiped out completely, and they will not be able to come back for maybe 80 years, 80, 90 years, they will not be able to come back. So that is one thing. And on the other hand, the people keep saying, oh, but Trump, we voted for Trump, but he's not the greatest guy to have in office. But the fact is, why did the people vote for Trump? Not because he was anti-establishment. They voted for Trump because he was the only guy willing to go more right than the Republican establishment. Because the people wanted to go more right than the Republican establishment wanted to go. Right.
So I have to disagree with a couple things, but I think we share the whole issue with how they're trying to obfuscate what's really happening. But I'm seeing it from both Larry Gerke and to a certain extent somebody else in the chat. I don't remember who, but they're asking, what's the issue with why are they burying the universal health care and things like that. And I had a discussion this weekend on with a friend of mine who is a conservative, but he's like a Fox News conservative. And Fox News conservatives, they literally can't think outside of their TV box. And I'll explain why they're burying the progressive agenda, and it's very simple. They need Bernie Sanders because yes, he proposes the universal health care. He'll propose the progressive jobs plan to give it to everybody. And what that gives the other Democrats the ability to do is say, you see that? That's the crazy guy who's too far to the left. Now let us propose this idea. Instead of universal health care, we propose Obamacare. Instead of the jobs plan of Bernie's, which is essentially, a far left socialistic or FDR style plan, we're going to propose a massive infrastructure plan. We're not going.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. With Obamacare, they get to pocket more money.
Well, okay, so yeah, I'm getting to that. The whole point is that they don't. Their goal is not the Democratic Party as a whole is not to impose direct state control. But what they do want is higher taxes. What they do want is to be able to distribute the tax money from that to their corporate friends and allies, the insurance companies and lobbyists, like Arjun's talking about, even including defense contractors, by the way, who people think, oh, it's the Republicans who support defense contractors. Look at the votes on defense appropriations. It's bipartisan usually, all of them. So the idea behind this is that when you have people, and I'm not a progressive, I will never support universal health care. You can stab me in the heart and I still won't support it. By that point, it wouldn't matter. But the idea is that they use him as kind of a straw man, as the stalking horse for what they really want to do, which is to impose policies that are corporate welfare. Obamacare, as I've explained in all the videos that I've done about it, is a means to tax people in order to hand that tax money to insurance companies. I think I'll let Arjun have the last word for 2 minutes, but I really do want to go. So anything else, any more thoughts about Russia or Joy Reid or anything else we talked about today?
Yeah, about the Russia thing. The Russia thing, politically, it is a gold mine for Trump. Trump just for extended periods of time, he gets to play the victim, and the more victim he plays, the more votes he gets for the next election, right? And this time in the primaries, you will see probably the result of what the Democrats have been doing because of all this mudslinging. You'll see the results in the primaries. The other thing is about say about the establishment, democratic establishment. The guys, they are desperately trying to keep the far left out. That's why they're dropping the progressive policies. You may have a couple of disagreements. I would like to hear what your side of that argument is. But from my reading of it, it is the democratic establishment for them. It has become a battle for survival, not only against Trump and the conservative movement, but also against their own far left.
Right? Oh,
absolutely,
yeah. We agree. Yeah, on that we do agree.
So that they are trying to keep the far left out because of that, and also the fact that if they keep the far left out, they get to keep their cushy sort of arrangements that they have with their corporate friends. The other thing is about the media. The same with the media. Joy and Reid and all this. These are all like casualties of this battle for survival which is going on. The thing that you covered about the education system, that we can have a different sort of debate regarding that, in the sense that maybe a fractured education system might not be the best idea. Like, even though you can give the states more powers, a fractured education system has its own drawbacks in the long run, because India has had a fractured education system for the longest time, and it has not worked well for us. It started improving after a central board of secondary education was sort of introduced. So, and the other thing is about the White House correspondence. I saw last year's White House correspondence dinner and this year's correspondence dinner. I saw a part of it. This year was really bad. Like, there was like, I don't know who was laughing. She was making one joke after the other, but I don't think people were laughing at the punchlines. And the thing with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, when she attacked her, it was like really cringeworthy. Like, I mean, what are you doing? Right? It was like the time when Seth Meyers went after Donald Trump in that Obama White House correspondence dinner. It was like that. It was like, it's too personal. But last time, Hassan Minhaj's thing was also not really funny. There were a couple of funny jokes he made about CNN, but apart from that, I don't think Hassan Minhaj is too funny. Like, I even saw his Netflix special, which you were talking about. That Netflix special, it was like, he was like, basically, like, he was shouting about, oh, people don't like me because I'm Muslim. He was talking about his like high school girlfriend who and her family who didn't want her to go to the prom with Hassan Minhaj, and then later she married some weird a South Indian guy with a very long surname. So he talks about those things in his Netflix special, so which was really funny for me to see that. So yeah, so the White House Correspondents' Dinner has become an activist's playground, basically. Like to speak about it like that. And generally, politics in the USA is taking an interesting turn now, because it can change at any moment, because nothing is permanent in politics. But if Trump is smart enough and he can manage his personnel well, like the people he hires well, and he chooses good people, he can really put the screws to the Democratic Party and wipe out this progressive, liberal, and entire this left complex. He can wipe it out. He can just wipe. He has that opportunity now.
All right, you heard it from Arjun. And
I'm afraid of that.
Yeah, that's definitely like something. I think he's doing it very well, and like I said earlier, I don't know if you were in the chat at the time, but the Hassan Minhaj thing, since then, nobody in the chat, by the way, could remember who he was. Besides, I think maybe you did, but this time next year, nobody's going to remember this Michelle Wolf chick. And that's about it for today. So thank you, Arjun, for being, the color commentator, the way they do in football. And yeah. Oh man, we should eat some brains next time. And thanks to the audience. I want to mention the people that I can still see in the chat. We have Pat Sella, Larry Gerke, Jeffrey Allen Johnson. Hope you guys have all subbed. Augusto Pinochet, the former dictator of Chile. Lisa PDX. Who else did I miss? Marshall Gordon, you're somewhere in there. Lennon McCarthy, as always. Marshall Gordon did get butthurt a bit, but what are you going to do? Who else is here? I forgot somebody. I didn't just reel off 11 names. Carlos was here earlier. Yeah, I see him. Yeah, that's it. I can't roll any further back. So if I missed your name, sorry. But have a great day. And Arjun, we'll talk again sometime.
When are we going to have the debate on gender?
Well, let's talk to Alicia about that.
Yeah.